Hello everyone. How are you doing? Good morning. It is Wednesday, our usual day, but definitely not our usual time. Um, have been delivering a training online with a friend, and it happened to be for 3 days of this week, and as a result, I had to change the time of our weekly meetings here, but I'm excited to share some things with you. If you got the newsletter and yesterday's blog post, it's a bit of a reuse. Hi, good morning. It's a bit of a reuse. My friend that I am working with is actually live. So if you got the training from yesterday, you will know. Oh, I see a sign that my microphone is perfect. Okay. Sounds good. You will see that it's actually using content that I had delivered inside this group that I hadn't delivered outside or put it anywhere else. It's on our YouTube channel, and if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, especially if you're not someone that is a super big fan of being on Facebook regularly, I understand that, I respect that, and you have that option. You can see our Qualitative Wednesdays presentations on YouTube instead. They are usually less than 20 minutes, but they are uploaded there not immediately, but within the week that I present them here. So it's interesting because in yesterday's blog post and then the video that was uploaded on the website, I gave a really detailed presentation here about conducting online focus groups. And when I did that, I actually had to go out and get the expertise of other people who had delivered or conducted online focus groups and got them to help me with some of the things that they had to think about, that they had to actually spend some time considering and really being mindful as they were going through their data collection using online focus groups. So the thing that I am doing this week is not conducting online focus groups. It's actually a training, but it's a very interactive training. And my friend and I, she has more experience than I do, and she's great about it. And I am getting kind of like retrained and more practice in the training. But we got a really quiet group of 8 people for this week. And that drove some curveballs at us because we weren't expecting to really deal with white space, what I like to call white space, but in other words, silence, as much as we had to see through in the past couple of days, yesterday in particular. And as we were reflecting about the training, there were a couple of things that came up in our conversation that is applicable to any of you who might be conducting online focus groups or interviews. And the first thing that I'm actually going to say is group size. I think group size was something that I touched in the live about online focus groups, and I would reiterate here about the size of the group. If you're doing online focus groups for the first time, you haven't built a relationship with the people in person or from other or previous meetings, keep your group sizes small. I would actually encourage you to think about 5 people maximum, including you. So if you have you and someone who is going to be taking notes and debriefing, no more than 5, 6 people in any online session. And if you think about it, even how what you might be using, so Zoom or Adobe Connect or go-to meetings, when you add too many people and more than actually 8 people, you don't get to see all of them on the screen unless you click an arrow, and their faces get too small. So the more people you have, the harder it tends to be. That has been our experience this week, and when we reflected on what could have made things easier for us in terms of engagement, size of the group was one of the things that my friend came up as a thought, as a reflection, and I completely agree. So keep your group small if you're doing online focus groups or group interviews for the first time. And even if it's not your first time, but if it's the first time with a specific topic or a new area of research for you, keep your groups small. Keep your numbers lower than you would strive for in-person focus groups. That's the first point. The second point is applicable to both interviews, focus groups, group interviews, dyadic interviews, anything. And it touches a bit on the content that I shared last week about developing interview guides. When you're constructing an interview guide, and one of the things that I recommended, and it was a recommendation slash suggestion, was to keep your questions really open-ended, exploratory, and have themes, almost like umbrella themes, that they would be related to things that you wanted to learn, to find out more, to investigate, explore in more detail. And instead of having too many questions and getting carried away, to have a list of probes that you could ask in relation to a question that you would be asking in a more open-ended, exploratory way. One thing that we learned with a quiet group was that we had to use more specific questions. Questions that were too open about how does this make you feel? What do you think about this? How do you think this would make the person you're helping feel? Like those questions that were about general feelings, perceptions, thoughts, were not getting us anywhere. They weren't getting much traction with a quiet group. And I can give you a few reasons we think the group was quiet. I don't think it's very relevant to you and your project, so I'm not going to go there. But the group was quiet. That was a fact. That was our circumstance. And the thing that we found that could have helped us was for us to be prepared with more specific questions. And I will tell you that if you are going for online or focus groups for the first time, again, in this new environment, this new situation with COVID-19 still being the case, being out there for most of us, have some questions in your pocket that are specific, that are related to your probes, that will maybe, and I am saying depending on your area, be calling out on very, very specific things that your participants are saying, or even calling out specific names in a focus group. So one example, and I am using someone from the group that has shared his experience and what he's trying to do. So with Matt's previous example, like doing research with ICU patients, maybe really going into detail, like what was your experience with the physiotherapist that was coming every day for physio. So if you really want to get more participation, and asking general questions about experiences, for example, are not getting you anywhere, feel that might need to be a necessary step. Know that might need to be a necessary step. I was going to say, feel free to give yourself grace and permission to be more specific. It happens. It's not easy. We know. It's very fresh for me in the past 48 hours how you get to talk way too much, probe way too much, and feel that you're not doing the greatest job. And I can tell you that it's a really uncomfortable feeling in many senses. So reflect about it as much as you can is the third point that I was going to raise. I know I've been reading a lot about reflexivity as I am getting a module ready for Qualitative Research Blueprint, the the program that I'm launching in the fall. And one of the things that I've been reading is this whole idea about reflexivity having become or becoming, actually, I should say becoming, because I think it's becoming almost what qualitative research became more than 10 years ago, more than, I would say, a decade and a half or 2 decades ago, where everyone started to include in all projects because granting agencies were requiring that, or were seen as a positive addition to projects, but people were almost using as a token, right? Oh, I have a qualitative piece included. I feel like reflexivity is almost the new token, and that word is actually from Jen Morse. She has an editorial called Qualitative Tokenism, and I feel reflexivity is becoming kind of like the new trendy token. Being reflective, thinking about your thinking, about your interpretations, about you as you're experiencing something. But it's necessary, I think, especially if you are going through things for the first time in this environment. And even if you're not, we are going through so much that I think there is so much to be gained in terms of insights by looking at yourself, at your experience, at the world around you, what you think about the people that you're working with. So in the case of me and my friend, we had to lay out our biases yesterday and say, we think this group is quiet because XYZ. So we listed a few of our reasons, but they were biases that we have about our participants in this case. So make sure that you don't skip the reflection and be responsive to what you're seeing and reflecting about. So those are the few things that I wanted to share today. If you guys that are online have any questions, let me know. Before I wrap up, I will say that can I just say, with all the grace that is in me, cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace if you have conducted recently an interview or a focus group or facilitated anything that you felt it was far or less than ideal. I think yesterday I had a major headache by the end of the day. I didn't feel things were at all. I felt like it was failing in all areas of my life, to be sincere. Like my kids, my house is a mess, my training didn't go well, and so many things didn't feel like they were as I wanted them to be. And that's where I've been borrowing something that I've read in many books and I've heard in so many podcasts that I have a hard time actually saying the main person that has said this before. I am really working hard not to see what I initially think of as failures, but rather as learning opportunities. It's more like I didn't fail at that. I learned something. And if you are getting really bogged down with the idea that you're failing at something, keep it in mind that what did you learn? And keep that lesson closer to you rather than what you're feeling that has been a failure. Just going to check the question. When you're leading a focus group, how appropriate do you think it is to address the silence and ask them what you can do for them? Or do you think it is more appropriate to just adjust your questions? Great question. I think two things. I think embracing silence is necessary. And I would not create a discomfort about the silence because in general, it's something that I feel like we are all super uncomfortable. And I'm generalizing here. Most people are super uncomfortable with sitting in silence. It's one of the reasons that I think we jump too fast to telling, suggesting, giving advice, and commonly making assumptions that are not true about the people that we were talking to. I wouldn't change that. So I wouldn't address silence and say, you're all very, very silent. I would really try to use other strategies. And the ones that we have discussed would be really like asking specific questions. So I wouldn't be close to the idea of asking really, really specific questions. So in the case of our area of research, because I know your area of research, like if I am trying to really explore the role of a dietitian in prenatal care, I would be going really deep in those questions. I want you to think, how can you ask a question that is really specific? And if that fails, I would try to really go to someone, if it's a focus group, and use anything that anyone has given you previously and ask a question to that person. So let's say Jane, you had mentioned before that you had seen a dietitian in the clinic. What was your experience with the advice she provided you about vitamin D? So ask Jane a very, very specific question so she can say, oh, I didn't hear anything about vitamin D. And I'm assuming vitamin D would be important for your project. So whatever is important for your project, ask that question very specifically, but I wouldn't address silence. I don't think I would, because I would want to be comfortable and to tell people that like it's okay, like, and I might have actually said, if you don't think that I am okay with us sitting in silence, I think we all need this time to reflect. But I wouldn't make that in a way that they feel they need to jump in and give me something when everyone is silent. I hope that makes sense. Yes, yeah, well, thank you. And keep working, keep learning, and keep practicing what I am working so hard to practice. It's so hard. Not a failure. I'm a learner. You're not a failure. And even when you don't really do well with something or don't achieve or succeed in an area of your life, I bet you learned something. And I think that's so important for all of us at any point, but especially now. So have a good day, everyone, and I'll see you soon. See you next week.